you name the number of parents tagged with a threat tag. Number one, people who are identified as threats, which is what you were referring to as threat tags, may or may not be parents. There's no way of knowing whether they're parents or not, number one. And number two, the number will vary by the day. So the amendment simply is impossible. And on that grounds, I would oppose it.
Chairman?
For what purpose does the gentleman seek
I
recognition?
withdraw my point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Point of order is withdrawn. I stated my opposition. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, would you yield to a question?
I've already yielded back. Who seeks recognition? Mr. Jordan? What purpose does Mr. Jordan?
Strike the last word.
The gentleman is recognized.
You said there's no way of knowing. How do you know? We just had a debate an hour or so ago, and you said that parents are tagged. You said it's the
I'll answer
investigation.
your question. You just asked me a question. How do you know?
Okay.
The report is the reports that are generated are the number of threats. There's no way of knowing whether the person who made the threat or the subject of who made the threat is a parent. That's not reported.
Gentleman, yield.
I would yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Just a quick question, which I'd pose if it would fix the concern of the chairman, we could say individuals as opposed to parents, if that's the concern. But again, the number of individuals who've been assigned that threat tag for those reasons would be the inquiry.
Yeah, and that was my point. An hour or so ago, it seemed to me the argument from the chairman was no name would be associated with the EDU official tag. It would be tagged to an investigation, and I said, well, who are you investigating? You investigate people, so there's going to be some name associated with it. My gut tells me some of those are going to be parents, maybe not, maybe someone else, but usually when you got concerns with school board matters, it's parents showing up to talk about the concerns they have regarding the education of their child. So to say it's not a parent, I don't think you can make that statement either. There's going to be someone's name associated with it. That's what we're asking to be reported. And the debate we had a couple hours ago, it seems we can get an answer to that if this amendment is added to the legislation. There's all kinds of other reporting requirements in the legislation. Why not report on a fundamental question about the concern we have, which is moms and dads being hit with this specific designation? We'll be happy to yield to the gentleman from Wisconsin.
Yeah, thank you. So I would just ask the question of the gentleman from North Carolina. It seems like, I mean, should we be open to amending the bill based on what I'm hearing from the chairman, that I'm hearing the words impossible to know? Well, it seems to me it should be possible to know if we just are collecting, if the FBI is correcting the information, if they're collecting that information.
If the gentleman from Ohio would yield for that.
I'm happy to yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I think what I was probing for is there any language that we could modify that would satisfy the majority? If there's any comedy, any inclination at all to address the concern. We know the threat tags out there. We know that it had to come forward from a whistleblower. We know that it was something contrived with the National Association of School Boards because they didn't like parents protesting. And so it would be a simple thing to report on. And again, the point is to express the willingness to change the language in a way that would be satisfactory to the majority. But otherwise, I do think the question is whether parents are being threat tagged. And I yield back.
And I would just say, I do think there's a way of knowing. Your language seems to be that particular, the solution. And if it needs amended, fine. And if the Democrats don't want to go there, I think it raises an even bigger question. Why don't they? Why don't they want to fix it? Why don't they want to know? I would love to know how many individuals, most likely being parents, have this designation associated with their name, what that number is, who they are, what the circumstances are. I think that's relevant information for the committee. We'll be happy to yield to the gentleman. Need more time, then I'll go to the
Mr. Jordan, if you yield.
Yeah, I'll yield to the gentleman from North Carolina, then I'll come to Andy.
I thank the gentleman. And that's sort of right at the heart of it. If there's, again, we've been told that this is imagination, that it's poll-driven, scandal mongering. Well, why not take the slightest, easiest expedient to get rid of it, to address it? If there's nothing to be concerned about, why not just put the clause in there that would say report on this and then we'll get a number. It'll come back, and it'll be 0. It seems like it would work in the favor of those who at least ostensibly resist this on the grounds there's nothing to it. It does happen to be the case, though, those same folks who are resisting on the grounds there's nothing to it have not brought the Attorney General back to ask questions, have not been interested in following up the information that had to come forward only through the voluntary forthcoming of a FBI whistleblower, do not seem to be concerned about the very oddity of having an a threat tag in the domestic terrorism database being set up about controversies over school boards. I yield back to the gentleman.
Thank you, Tim. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word. I'd like to strike the last word
Gentlelady is recognized.
and yield to the chairman.
I thank the gentlelady. If the minority will agree to withdraw this amendment and other subsequent amendments and to get to a vote on this bill, we will be willing to work with the minority to capture this information in the context of this report.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'd be happy to entertain a specific proposal to modify this amendment. I certainly am not in position to speak to other people's
Can't
amendments.
do that right now. We'll be happy to work with you to figure out a way to capture this information in the context of this report.
Mr. Chairman, I decline to withdraw the amendment.
Okay? Then I'll yield. I yield back.
And I yield to the gentlelady from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
Very briefly, I will take a moment to say to my friends, on a personal note, I don't concede the crisis that you're trying to achieve, but I do respect the fact that you have a particular perspective. As I read the language of this section, it has to do with the actors. The first report and analysis of the incidents or attempted incidents of domestic terrorism that occur in the United States, including white supremacist-related incidents or attempted incidents. So it has a certain framework. Unless you want to include parents in that category, there is no definitive attack on parents for going to a school board meeting or talking to their teachers. If they're acting in a way, talking to their children's teachers, they're acting in a way that characterizes the incidences that's generated these attacks, then they come under the broad umbrella.
Would the gentlelady yield?
Not at this time. They come under the broad umbrella, if that is even the case. And so I make the argument is that we're trying to classify and get information on entities and individuals not yet classified, that we have proven that the FBI doesn't have any purposeful effort dealing with this, and the only desire that they have is to protect elected officials and or teachers if something occurs that would be threatening to their life or the quality of life. So I would make the point that I would hope maybe you would take up the chairman's offer that we can explore this together to be reasonable and to respond to an aspect of what you're suggesting, but it really at this point does not fit because there is no purposeful effort on behalf of the FBI that you all can document. With that, I yield to Ms. Loughran.
And reclaiming my time, I'll yield back to the remaining time.
For what purpose does Mr. Biggs seek recognition?
Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate some of the offers that have been put out there. It's just, I just want to clarify a couple things. I mean, when the chair said it's impossible to determine if somebody's a parent or not a parent, that's really quite an interesting statement. We're asking for a report on an assessment of domestic terrorist threats posed by white supremacists and neo-Nazis. Now, in order to determine that somebody is a white supremacist and neo-Nazi, the FBI is going to have to gather evidence or indicia. It may be documentary evidence, it may be photographic evidence, it may be video evidence, it may be literature, it may be other paraphernalia that is indicative of someone who you would characterize as a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi. Similarly, one would anticipate that this same crackerjack investigative team of the FBI would be able to determine if through various indicia, various evidence, maybe it's documentary, photographic, video, literature, oral testimony. Are you a parent of someone who's in this school district? Why, yes, I am. That might be an indicator that somebody is a parent. It is not impossible, Mr. Chairman. And since this aspect that the gentleman from North Carolina is getting at is merely asking for reporting, you would assume that the federal police apparatus could discern as clearly that someone is a parent as we believe that they can, someone is a white supremacist, neo-Nazi, or anything else that pertains to this bill, or any other federal designation. And with that, I will yield to the gentleman from Ohio.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Again, just remember, this is simply a reporting amendment. There's all kinds of reporting in the legislation. And don't forget, the catalyst for all this had some reporting in it. The initial School Boards Association letter cited 24 incidents where they said these are the 24 examples that they had in their letter that went to the Attorney General, and he said was the basis for his memorandum setting this whole process in motion. And of those 24, 20 were not even violent in any way, shape, or form. And the 4 that could be categorized as violent, one was the situation in Virginia, where I think any dad would have probably taken the action that that father took at that particular meeting. So there was reporting there that was way out of line for what the Justice Department is now undertaking and what they're doing. So we're simply saying on the other end, what's happening now? Remember, in the reporting in that initial letter, the School Board Association has since apologized for the letter. And that's what started it all. So the gentleman from North Carolina has a simple amendment. Tell us what's going on. Where is this designation, this label, this threat tag? Who's it being assigned to? How's it being done? We want to know, because we know what started it all was not presented in an accurate fashion whatsoever. And that was the catalyst for it all. So we kind of like to know and I think, frankly, the American people, and certainly moms and dads, would like to know. Would thank the gentleman for yielding. Would yield back.
Thank you. Now yield to the gentleman from North Carolina.
I thank the gentleman from Arizona, and to a couple points. Again, question is, what is the objection to letting this be disclosed? Even the details of how this is being used. And I have some sensitivity to the point made by the gentlelady from Texas about the language, putting this language in here and the number of parents tagged with the threat tag edu officials into this provision about reporting on domestic terrorism. But again, remember, National School Boards Association letter said this should be characterized as domestic terrorism. That's what they really recognized they had to apologize for. And of course, what we're talking about is a tag that is used in a counterterrorism database by the Counterterrorism Division of the FBI. I don't know where else you would put it other than asking for reporting about incidents of domestic terrorism that are being investigated or recorded by the FBI. Hence, makes all the sense in the world to me. Again, I'm perfectly glad to accept alternative ways to express it, but I don't want to let the issue go and not be addressed at all. Hence, I'm not willing to withdraw the amendment, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields
Chairman,
back. For what purpose
have,
is the gentleman from...
I have a unanimous consent, if I could, please. Just two.
Gentleman will...
Just two for a change, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman will proceed.
Yeah, one is the New York Times article about FBI threat tagging, and another is from yahoo.com, Terry McAuliffe, Parents Don't Know.
Without objection. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland seek recognition?
I just move to strike the last word. Just want to